I had a conversation with a 65-year-old, about to turn 66, who's early in his in kind of a traditional retirement and getting back into motorcycling like he did when he was a kid. Not in a crazy way, but in a pretty thoughtful way, proper training, proper gear, the whole bit, riding on safe streets, but loving the heck out of it, and he says, yes, it is a calculated risk. And a lot of my friends who are really nervous go, aren't you worried about dying? Aren't you worried about dying? He goes, I am. I'm trying to be very careful. I am worried about dying, but I'm much more worried about not being alive than I am about dying.
Hi, this is David Aben, founder of The Bucket, and your host for today's podcast with Dave Evans, who uses human-centered design to help people get unstuck. In a previous lifetime, Dave was at Apple, where he led the team that created the first mouse. He was also co-founder of Electronic Arts, and after that, a management consultant. Eventually, Dave found his real passion, helping people discover and build the life they really want. Together with Bill Burnett, he founded the Stanford Life Design Lab in 2007, where their Designing Your Life course became a campus favorite, and in 2016, a New York Times best-selling book. Welcome, Dave. Thanks so much for talking with me today.
David, thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, good. Now, I've read your book, of course, but for the benefit of our listeners, can you explain what you mean by human-centered design and how does it help people get unstuck?
Okay, HCD, or human-centered design, is an approach, it's a methodology to innovating new idea solutions to difficult problems that you can't solve by doing traditional, technical analysis or quantitative spreadsheeting because you don't have enough information. They're what we call wicked problems. Wicked problems tend to be ones where you don't know what you're looking for until you find it, and the solution you need has to be entirely customized to the particular situation or person involved. It's not replicatable. So those kinds of problems are what we call wicked problems, and in those situations, you can't engineer your way forward or analyze your way forward, or you can only build your way forward. You can try ideas out because you're building this thing called the future we've never heard of before, and the only way to do that is empirically, by actually trying it. So we do this prototype iteration, and we have ways of coming up with good ideas to think about the problem creatively, then have ideas about how to approach it creatively, and then the key thing is we go try stuff. And when we try stuff and we iterate that, we get good at doing that fast and inexpensively. We learn our way forward and come up with things we actually can do in real time in the real world, and then put those things in place. And we developed this methodology in the 60s at Stanford University. It's now more often referred to as design thinking. David Kelley, our current ranking professor of design at Stanford and the founder of IDEO, the largest design consultancy in the world, rebranded human-centered design as design thinking. And that took off about 10, 15 years ago. And because we can help people learn how to successfully innovate on processes, on products, and now on their lives, it's become pretty hot. So design thinking is hot. And human-centered design simply means a process of innovating that understands how humans do innovation work. So it's a humanly done process to result in a humanly workable outcome, something you can really use and really works for human beings. So that's a semester course in about 2 minutes.
Well, it's just as I read your introduction a moment ago, when you made that transition from being a management consultant to the co-founder of Life Design Lab, was that an example of you getting yourself unstuck?
It was absolutely an example of prototyping my way forward. I think in retrospect we could say that I was stuck, but I wasn't aware of it. I've only been working on the stuff that has now turned into this book and the conversation we're having today for about 40, 45 years. It started when I was a sophomore in college a long, long time ago. I'm 66. And back in the 70s, when I did not know what to do with the question, well, young man, what do you want to do the rest of your one wild and precious life? Wow, that's a really good question. And I found, everybody, frankly, kind of criminally negligently unhelpful on getting traction on that question. Lots of people wanted to know my answer. Well, what are you going to do? But nobody would help you figure it out. And so I launched off into that, the hard way, and finally found my way to some stuff. I'll skip over the intervening 40 years. But then ended up, being this tech guy. And so I'm at Apple, I'm in Electronic Arts, I'm doing the Silicon Valley thing. But all along the way, in my own life, still trying to live what I would now call the coherent life, where who I am and what I'm doing and what I believe are in alignment. And I feel like, I look in the mirror and like the real Dave Evans is looking back at me. Not like some guy that, you don't want to wake up at 50 and go, oh my God, I became somebody else that I don't even know. What happened here? That common experience, looked to me like an option I'd like to skip. So I kept working on it, and I noticed everybody else is concerned about it too. I mean, all the people I was working with at Electronic Arts, we wrote the manifesto before we wrote the business plan. We wanted to not just create products that people wanted to buy, we wanted to create work that people wanted to do and lives that people wanted to live. So that's been coming up, corporate culture and what are we about and is this work meaningful? So in the workplace, I found almost everybody who can dress themselves and kind of cares about what they do for 40, 50, 60 hours a week is asking these questions and getting a lot less help than they deserve. And I'm going, God, this is ridiculous. And then in 1999, I'm chatting with Randy over a cup of coffee over at UC Berkeley. He runs a private dorm for a student community, and we're chatting about this stuff. And Randy goes, Dave, you should teach a class here. And I ended up doing that. And then 8 years later, my buddy Bill Burnett got this new job running the design program at Stanford. And go, oh, the design guys, they're the lunatic fringe. This is a great idea. And that's a much better drive for me. It's not such a long drive. So Bill and I had lunch in the summer of 2007, and I shared some thoughts. He goes, that's a great idea. We got to do it. We'll start this fall. We'll prototype it this summer. Let's go. I got to run. It was a 5-minute meeting. And then, little did we know that we started this thing that is very exciting and is kind of ruining our lives at last. So I wasn't stuck, but I was just leaning my way into this question over and over again, having a lot of what we would now call life design prototype conversations and running little life design prototype experiences. And one of those turned into an invitation to create what has now become, frankly, the most important work of my life.
Well, that's really cool. One of the things that really struck me in my life and working the way through, that idea that you can be successful but be stuck and not really realize it. That idea that, wait a second, I have a good job, I'm doing well. And it seems like people who are successful probably have more trouble recognizing that they're stuck than other people.
Oh, yeah, because there are versions of stuck that are very happy. They're working really well. I mean, a lot of the people we've talked to who are, midlife and beyond, are happily stuck in this really successful career, making at least plenty, if not a bunch of money, and perceived a very noble and generative way that they're tired of and can't find a way out of. And even if they could find a way out of it, I don't know what they'd do with it, but they're pretty sure, I'd rather not stay here if I had an option, but I'm pretty sure I don't.
Right.
While people stand in a big circle enviously looking at them. That's a sadly common experience, astonishingly common among lawyers, by the way, for some reason. We talk to an awful lot of unhappy lawyers.
Well, one of the concepts in your book that I really thought was powerful was the way you define the different types of problems. You mentioned wicked before, but you talk about gravity problems and anchor problems. It's really important to know the difference, isn't it?
Yeah. And the difference between a gravity problem and an anchor problem, as we described them, can be a little nuanced, but there really is a clear distinction. There are some examples that you could put in both categories at the same time. That's sort of a special, like, double dip problem. But a gravity problem, which I named because I'm a bicyclist, and I didn't put on the freshman 15, when I was 18 years old, the 15 pounds you get through your freshman year. I didn't do that, but I did put on the 60-20, so, when I got into my 60s, I picked up 20 pounds that I wasn't very excited about and still am managing to hang on to. And accordingly, my bike started working really poorly, and I noticed it was going up hills a lot more slowly than it used to. And the problem was this gravity stuff. This gravity stuff's getting in my way. So I go to Bill. I go, Bill, I'm a cyclist, and I've got this problem. This gravity thing is making me nuts. I've got gravity is a problem I don't know how to fix. Could you fix this for me? Could you give me an idea? And Bill looks at me and kind of goes, no, Dave, I can't help you because gravity is not a problem. It's a circumstance. There's nothing you can do. So we named it gravity problems because of my problem with that. And what that defines is there are a lot of problems that you get stuck on because when you look at it honestly, it's not actually a problem. Our definition of a problem is it is actionable. If the thing you're discussing is not actionable, it is not a problem, it's a circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
So a gravity problem is when you think what you need is an idea for a solution, and there isn't one because the problem isn't actionable. And then the outcome is you go, oh, gravity's unnegotiable, Dave. Your problem is you're heavier now, so you're more out of shape. Your muscles at the same strength have more work to do and tire more quickly, and your options are lose some weight, simply accept it and go slower, gear down, buy a lighter bike that has more gears on it so you can go up more easily. Once you accept the factedness of your gravity problem, what it frees you to do is say, well, what is there that I could do? What different problem can I have? How could a 20-pound heavier 60-year-old bicyclist compared to a lighter 40-year-old bicyclist have a good time on his bicycle, Dave? That's a different question.
Mm-hmm.
So that's gravity. Then anchor is a little bit different, but it's equal. They're both all about you are so stuck. You are so freaking stuck. The anchor problem is you are anchored literally to an immovable, insoluble situation because your problem statement actually isn't a problem. It's an unavailable solution masquerading as a problem that you're unwilling to renegotiate. It actually is potentially a solvable problem, but the way you framed it actually means you're not asking a question, you're announcing an answer, and you're going to hold your breath and turn blue till you get it.
Yeah, I love that example in the book. I think you used John, who wanted to do the mule trip to the bottom of the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
I think that's a great example. Can you tell our listeners about that?
Well, as is true, frankly, in just a very few select number of the examples. I'm John.
Oh,
I'm actually John. My middle name is John. And I'm 6'6" and now weigh 222. And for a lot of my, in my adult life, I've weighed all the way from 185 up to that number. I've been to the Grand Canyon a couple of times and backpacking this kind of stuff. And when my family was small, my wife, as a child, had taken the mule trip down to the bottom of the Colorado River from the rim, and it was an absolutely important memory. And we said we want to create that for our kids, But they have a weight limit. There's a weight limit of 200 pounds, fully dressed. Before you climb on the mule, whatever you're wearing, your boots, the whole bit, if it's 201, sorry, you're walking down or going home. And at the time, I think I weighed 195, and so fully dressed, I was at great risk. And so I said, well, boy, the kids are too small, but by the time the kids are older, I got to make sure I want to get down to, about 192, 190, then I think I can make it, and as the kids got old enough, there were a couple of years there when indeed they would be interested and we could go, and I was too big. And I kept, saying, well, we got to do the mule trip, and I'm going to make it, And of course, summers come in small increments. And, the half a dozen years when, frankly, that was the sweet spot in the kids' lives we could do that came and went, and Dave never ticked below about 198. And so that was, my problem was, how do I make sure I hit 198 before the end of the summer to take the mule trip? That's my problem. Solve that problem, Dave, because you got to take the mule trip.
Right.
And so I lost it. Nobody has that memory. Now, let's say, 2 years into that or a year into that, I kind of go, I notice that I'm doing a really poor job of dropping this weight, and most people my size weigh 20 pounds more than I do already. I'm actually skinny for my height. So, Dave, what do you really want here? Because if what you want is the mule trip, good chance you're never going to have it, because that solution to the having a family experience in the Grand Canyon is probably not going to work. That's that solution. But there is a bigger question, which is, how do we create an amazing experience for this family hiking, getting to the bottom of the Grand Canyon from the rim of the Grand Canyon? By the way, there are 4 ways to do that. And let's go research what those look like, because your chance of, by the way, training up to be able to do the walk down is easy. The walk up is tough, but you hike a lot, and you getting in shape to handle the hike is so much easier than for you to actually take the ride.
Right.
Or even, let the kids take the mule down, and we all want, how about plan B, C, D, E, or F?
Right.
Which might be a compromise on what I had in mind, but you go this all or nothing thing. Essentially an anchor problem is somebody has set up an all or nothing commitment to one and one answer only, and I'm going to go down swinging. And very often people regret that. Anchor problems in particular, and some gravity problems are a rife source of unnecessary agony in the lives of post midlife people.
Well, I think that the idea of anchor problems for our audience, for the Buckets audience, are the same but different. One of the reasons we reached out was because even though this began as a course for college students for you guys, it seems that what you're talking about, getting people unstuck, is not about age. And I think that our audience is certainly stuck in places. And in some ways, it's more difficult because, when you're starting your life, you're thinking about your career, what are you going to do? Everybody's stuck there in a way. And everyone's trying to figure that out.
Right.
But when people in their 50s and 60s, they're maybe thinking about retirement, or they're thinking about a job in retirement. And it's harder to recognize that being stuck, and sometimes you just start to live out the string, if you will. And so, in your experience, obviously you wrote the book and you have the online class. Are you seeing people who are older get involved in this and get unstuck?
It turns out the only people I teach at Stanford anymore are late life people from 50 to 80.
Really?
There's a comparatively new, I think it's fourth or fifth year tenure program called the DCI, the Distinguished Career Institute at Stanford University, conceived, founded, and run by Dr. Philip Pizzo, the former dean of the Stanford Medical School, a significant clinician in his own right, who, among other things, is deeply committed to lifelong thriving, and noticed the exact same thing that created your podcast and your audience, which is, there are a whole bunch of people who are in the process of needing to reinvent themselves and in ways that society has never experienced before because of longevity and what have you. And we need, that's not automatic. That doesn't fall off a log. We need to help these people. So the DCI is a year-long, so you apply to be a DCI fellow, and if admitted, and the admission rate is only about 10%, you get to write a big check for permission to come to Stanford for a calendar year for 12 months, along with another 40-odd people, similarly minded, very diverse group of people. And there are scholarships, so it's not all elitist, who are going to take a full year and ask the question, now what? And pretty quickly, I was talking with these people, and I said, you need to put a backbone underneath this thing. You can't just throw these people in the room and let them figure it out themselves, which essentially they did the first year or two. They said, look, these are really talented people. These are interesting people. You do not tell grown-ups what to do. You give them an environment. You put them in a room with a lot of Legos and just let them go. Well, that's true to a point. We all need a little bit of structural help. I'm not telling you what house to build, but a couple of tools and a couple of pre-milled pieces of lumber would be really handy. And so we had this conversation, and 4 years later, Designing Your Life is now the year-long structural backbone of the program. So I teach an intensive workshop on first designing your life, because everybody in the DCI program is thinking about, and they range all the way, frankly, from mid-40s to late 80s, and the big bump, as you would expect, is, mid-late 50s to, mid-late 60s. So I'm having lots and lots and lots and lots of these conversations with people that are probably just like the people in your audience. And does it apply? Oh, yeah. Best students ever had.
I'm curious. I was going to ask that. When people are in school and they're graduating, they know they, for the most part, have to come up with what they're going to do, or they had to already. And it's this rite of passage, and everyone has to do it, and there is a next thing, and what are you going to do? With people in our audience, they might be retiring, they might be just getting older. There isn't that same kind of pressure of what you have to do something next. And so in some ways, I mean, in my experience and talking to people, the fact that you don't realize you're stuck is actually one of the reasons you're not moving forward in your life.
Okay, yeah. The way I reframe what you just said, which I agree with, by the way, is conveniently. If there's we've all heard about the midlife crisis, right? And some years back now, the term quarter life crisis started getting popular, for the 22 to 25-year-old. And the convenience of the quarter life crisis is it's kind of ubiquitous, and it's sort of socially announced. Well, young lady, it's about time for you to hit the world. How's that going for you? And so everybody kind of knows it's coming, right? And there's a day, and if you went to college, and had that thing called school, which again is not everybody by a long shot, then there's a day, called frankly called this, the September or the October of your 22nd year when you're supposed to be in the game now. And so that's a convenient thing because it's normalizing.
Right.
Now, and whereas in the, when does the beginning of the rest of my life, which is kind of different than the life I already have, start? And the number of us, the corporation declares that you're going to retire on your 67th birthday, so that's the answer to your question. That's a dwindling population of people, very dwindling population of people for whom, thing next, or maybe not thing last, but thing next, encore. If we use Mark Freeman's term of encore, what my the deadline of an encore transition is very soft for most people, and so easily deferred, and that easy deference in time can set you up for kind of overrunning the tape a bit, and some people do that. They awaken to it a little bit later in life. We frankly don't think that's a problem to be that worried about. Wherever people are, design is very committed to this thing called reality. There's a big red ball with a "you are here" arrow on it, like you see in the airport locator map.
Right.
You are here. We have a huge one of those things over the graduate loft at the Stanford Design Education Center to remind students that all design begins with the present reality. Right where you are is exactly the right place to start, because trust me, if it all comes out happy, it goes through a place that looks just like this. There is no should. There is no what if, then, regret going. That just doesn't exist. So let's not waste any time on it. If you had it to do over, maybe you would have changed your mind sooner. Okay, well, that's called a learning. Now, that's great. Let's go. Let's take it from here. And so here is fine. There might have been here's that came and went. Give that, a good 3-4 minutes worth of grief and then move on. I'm not trying to be hard about that, but reality's fine. It's the only place cool stuff happens. Reality is the only place where the good stuff happens. If I want good stuff in my life, reality is the place to be. Let's go. We try to move people there as quickly as we can. And very often, reality is better than people think because they're comparing it to an imagined past that doesn't exist at all. And so they've got this valence of regret that's actually, underselling the present situation. So for many people, today's fine. Now, I'm not trying to deny oppression or poverty or cancer or, ageism or racism. These things are real, and design thinking doesn't have a magic wand to suddenly make the world Disneyland. I'm not saying that for a minute. People have real issues. But let's not make it harder than it has to be.
Yeah, it's one of the things you talk about is dysfunctional beliefs. And for our audience, it seems like that dysfunctional belief of it's too late. I can't change anything. Do you see that a lot?
Very common. It's very common. People believe it inside out. People tell it to them outside in. And I think sometimes navigating between issues you really got to pay some attention to, which is wisdom, versus a truly dysfunctional belief, which is crap, and there's no reason to be bound by it. No, those aren't handcuffs. That's spaghetti. If you just snap your wrist, it'll break just fine. Let's go. Discerning which is which is important. So deciding what you think, it's all about questions. Questions have belief systems. And before you authorize a question, what are the questions that are exciting you at this midlife or late midlife moment that you're in, bucket listener, and double check if that question is offering to you to be either your life organizing question or your life judging question. You better double check that the belief system that informs that question is true and aligned with your belief system. And if it's not, reject it and get another question. Picking your questions, particularly at this midlife point, because what is true is there's less runway in front of us than behind us, and these choices start becoming pretty precious.
Yeah, it must be. There's a rock climbing term called getting rimrocked. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's when someone is in the middle of a climb and they panic and they can't go up and they can't go down.
Right.
And
Outward Bound
go ahead.
works really hard to get people in that place so that they can then call up from below, and they're frozen on the rock, and announce to them one of the primary one-liners of the Outward Bound experience, which is, "Hey, David, looks like you're stuck up there." "Yeah, I am. We have a saying, when you can't get out of it, get into it."
That's
The
great.
advantage of being rim-rocked is, I now conveniently have no choice but to go.
Yeah, I think another thing that people are afraid of, though, and you talk about, is failure. And people
Sure.
are afraid, if I do this and it doesn't work out, then I failed.
Right, which is why we talk about failure immunity. Let me start by saying there is such a thing as an actual failure. It's easy to misperceive that those design guys all think, failure doesn't matter. I'm like, wait a minute, I can't, take all the equity out of my house and bet it on something and lose and find myself homeless. So there are real risks out there. I'm not saying there is no such thing as failure and that substantial failures aren't costly. Of course they are. When we talk about failure immunity, we specifically mean it around this whole idea of making changes in your life, the kind of stuff we're talking about in this call. And that, hey, you can really substantially, maybe even eliminate, the risk of real failure by learning how to do what we call, fail sooner to succeed more often, or, fail fast and fail forward. All those one-liners. What the heck are those guys talking about? What we're talking about is prototyping. In design, the core component of human-centered design, or design thinking, is prototype iteration. We know we don't know what we're doing here, so we're going to give it a try first. We're not going to try to sit on the couch and agonize and Google for 19 hours and come up with the right answer, put the whole bet on red 19 and spin the wheel and hope we're right. And if we're not, we're screwed. Okay, that's not failure immunity. That's failure optimization. That's making failure a huge problem. As opposed to, look, why do we come up with little tiny bets that don't cost very much at all, that we can learn our way forward, and so by the time we get to the big decision, we've really vetted something, we've really understood it, we've really learned, and we know what we're doing. That doesn't eliminate risk, but boy, does it manage it down. Because for us, a prototype simply means a conversation or an experience that asks an interesting question and allows us to learn about it in a cheap, fast, low-risk way. So Anne's thinking about going back and getting a master's, at 48. And boy, I'm just not sure. So, she takes a year-long, GRE preparation course, and she crams like crazy, and she pays all the money for the GRE, and she does it, and she gets a decent score. Then she puts together these applications, and she gets in, and she's working late night for a year and a half to get this done. She finally gets into this program, and she decides to take the full-time program. She actually takes a leave. She hopes she can get her job back when she's done, if she needs to, and it's a year and a half long master's program, and she's 4 months into this thing, and she goes, "Oh God, I hate this." That's a failure. And why don't you prototype this? How about, what is it you think about studying, and why is that interesting to you? And what are 5 different places that teach about that? And let's go find people your age who have that degree. Has that degree changed over time? Let's go have 24 conversations, including at least some people who started that master's and quit because it was so boring. Because you really want to know what the dark side sounds like as well as the right side, and how people have lived into that. And then what if you pretended to be a candidate for jobs that you think in the future you'd be able to get, and you call up some recruiters, and do an initial call, and at the end say, I'm probably not ready because I actually don't have this degree yet. I'm currently I'm a pre-student. I'm actually a pre-student, but I'm looking forward to see what we could happen here. And now you get some information, and you actually understand what's going on here, and you go, and maybe you could audit a class. You could actually try this thing. Could you do a ride-along with somebody that does this work in health policy at the county, And so then you run a bunch of these life prototypes. By the way, it turns out if you really get this, the design work itself isn't like the thing you have to get over to get to the important part, which is like, do I get the master's degree or not? It's not just the transaction of go to school or don't. It's like, oh, I'm actually living my life now. I'm actually a person who's living into becoming my future self. I'm living generatively. I'm meeting interesting people. I'm doing positive. This is all progress. I'm not on the way there. I'm in the process of being there the entire time.
So is life design a means to an end, or is it more of a way to live?
Yes.
That was an or.
Thank you. No, it's a little paradoxical that way. It is both. People walk up to us in a transitional moment. There are the three kind of big classical transitional moments. You're early 20-something, the first time joining the world. From not everybody, but a lot of people, somewhere between 35 and about 50, that midlife thing, like, oh my God, I'm looking in the mirror and I see my father looking back at me. I turn to this guy I don't want to be. How did this happen? Sort of wake up and find yourself in somebody else's life. And now what do we do? And then there's this, on the way to the encore thing, like, that first big movie is kind of over and now I'm going to go make some shorts or something like that. There's this sort of, later transition, described a variety of different ways. They're now sending me AARP magazine, and apparently it's not inappropriate. It was not misaddressed. There's that transition. Because AARP is 50 and up. Like, oh my God, it's a big group. Or I just got laid off. Or I moved to support my wife. Changing jobs. I have to reinvent myself here in Indianapolis. Whatever it might be. And so those are the three classic moments, right? So at these transitions. Then hey, I better go get myself, some tools, and maybe I'm going to grab this book, and I'm going to go do a life design project over the next 6 months, and then it's going to have an outcome, which very often has a vocational piece. Not always, but often has a vocational piece in it, a work or an engagement piece in the world, not necessarily for money. And so that's true. So is that a transactional process? Yes, absolutely. We're perfectly happy for people to do that. Pick it up, get through the thing, put it down, we're done, thanks. People ask us all the time, how often should I do Odyssey planning? We do this 3 versions of your life core exercise. And frankly, if you work in our lab, you have to do it once a year, and that's probably too often. Reinventing yourself every year is a little much. And you do Odyssey planning, you do this life design stuff, either when life asks it of you, you just got divorced, you're going to get reinvented, now what? Whatever. Or, when you ask it of you, this voice inside you finally says, hey, that was then and this is now. I don't know if you noticed, but we don't feel the same way about this life at all, and it's time for a change. So one of those two things occurs, and off we go. Then what you find, talking about is it a way of life? Yes, it is a way of life. This is why we talk about mindset. The mindset of curiosity, the mindset of bias to action, the mindset of collaboration. We keep saying stuff like, look, none of us knows the right answer. Life is an improv skit. It's a long-running improv skit. We're all making this up as we go along, dealing with all kinds of things out of our control. Now, there are big chunks of time when it works, the child-rearing years or the sweet spot of your career, and like it's kind of stable, but it's not going to last. It's going to change. I'm in my 6th career. I'm on kind of like my 4th life at 66. Literally, so life changes, right? So you're doing this stuff, and then you realize, oh, this way of thinking, this way of what's the interesting question life is asking of me now, and what interesting prototype conversations or experiences could I have that will begin to unmask and unpack that question for me in an interesting way as I continue to grow into my future self. There's always a question we're living into. And this design process can be a way that we address those questions. So we get really good at becoming our future selves on an ongoing basis. And it turns out that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I ran a town meeting in Seattle some years back, and at the end there's a Q&A time. There's about 400 people, and one guy, I'll call him Harry, sort of upper back left, raises his hand, goes, hey, Dave, kind of what? And I go, what? And he goes, this prototyping stuff, you could do that with like anything, right?
Right.
You can prototype like anything. Relationships or lifestyle or jobs or learning. I go, yeah, you could prototype anything. And he goes, so you could do it about anything, and you could be doing this all the time. You could be doing prototyping all the time. You could be running little prototypes almost like a side interest all the time, right? And I go, yes, you can. He goes, oh, wow, great. A couple more questions. Third time, raises his hand. I go, hey, Harry, what? What do you want, Harry? And he goes, so Dave, you can prototype anything all the time, and that's a really big deal, isn't it? And I said, yes, Harry, it is. He goes, oh, now I get it. I said, yeah, I think you do. So that's true, too. So a transactional relationship with this stuff is fine, but then you realize, wait, there's at least a chunk, maybe not it's not a religion, but there's some way of life stuff here that could be very life-giving.
Actually, I do want to talk to you about that relationship thing, because a lot of our audience is going through transition, and either they're looking to revive a marriage or perhaps start a new relationship. So how does life design work for that?
The relationship thing comes up all the time, and we have a very specific idea about that. So how do we design our life together? And what I'll say about that as briefly as I can is, first of all, if you use our ideas and you try to do it together, my assurance to you is it will either make it worse or it will make it better. It is not neutral. We will not leave you unscathed. How do you use the Bill and Dave, life design methodology and make it worse? By articulating a hostile negotiation. So I do my three Odyssey plans of three completely different versions of the next 5 years of my life, and you do yours. So person A, partner A and partner B. And partner A and partner B get together and they share their three stories together. We're having a lovely time and a glass of wine. We're doing this thing, and then you get to and then move to Beijing and have this cross-cultural experience for the next 3 years. And the listener goes, what? And then, when it's your turn, you go through, and your second thing is, and we actually move out, to the edge of town, and get a little paddock and 3 horses, and I finally fulfill my dream to become an equine therapist. And you go, oh, God, the horses again. When is that going to stop, this damn horse thing? Jesus, thought we were done with this. And now we've helped you write down things on pieces of paper that you got really excited about, you're ready to defend, and now the negotiation starts, and it gets really hostile. So it gets worse. Back when you kind of weren't talking about it, at least we were getting along. Now we know exactly what's wrong with you. And my job is to defeat that stupid Beijing thing, or no freaking way there's going to be a horse in my backyard. So it's going to get worse. That's not helpful. So let's talk about not how to do it wrong. Let's talk about doing it right. How do I do life design together where these design thinking-based ideas could actually help us come up with our well-lived and joyful life? Well, here's the trick. And the key word here is us. It's not you and me, it's us. If you talk to, this depends on your life view and your world view, but you talk to most people in an important relationship. Even if it's a friendship, we're going to go do this together. I have people who've organized their retirement years around where friends will be. Let's all move together and make a little village. Or it could be a classic marriage or a partnership or what have you. Whoever it is that really matters, that you want to do this together with, we'll call you and that person or persons us. And one of the lovely things about us is when we're together and experiencing the best of why we're together, there's something happening here that is truly synergistic. I'm not sure it's 1 + 1 = 3, but 1 + 1 equals a more than 2, that it takes all of us for that more than the eye meets the eye experience to generate. And that's one of the things that holds us in this relationship. There's the moreness of us than just you and me. And this is the second, that's assumption number 1. And assumption number 2 is that moreness, when we are really on it, where we're in flow as a couple, if you will, is a good thing and brings out the best of both of us. So when we are doing us well, we are wiser. So let's appeal to us by having you and me enter the design process with a commitment to being open-minded, teachable, and creative, and remembering that prototypes are just asking interesting questions. They are not making decisions. They are not making commitments. And that the only way to have a successful prototype is to have the open-mindedness of a person who's a learner. So you say, let's go to Beijing, and your sense of, whoa, that scares the bejesus out of me, and you go, gee, I'm so excited that you find that interesting. That's so interesting. Say more about it. Let's find a way to conceive together a prototype of China in a way that, if indeed the wisdom of us together in a jointly experienced encounter called a little prototype, or a couple of prototypes, will inform me that Beijing actually might be the way to go, I'm ready to hear that. So my job is to bring the open-minded person in. Let's go have prototypes be the substrate upon which we will grow into something together. Because I'm not going to start by assuming we have to agree before we even start. All we have to do is learn our way into what a future might be. And you could be surprised by joy. You never know. Or, you try really, really, really hard and it doesn't work. And then the person who loves Beijing goes, gosh, I'm really having the authentic experience of you not being able to be fully present here. And if you can't be fully present here, I'm not sure Beijing is going to work for me. Or I've also seen couples where they go and he's still, frankly, if I've been widowed by now, I would not be here. And if I'd come here, I wouldn't stay. But I got to tell you, I am seeing you come so alive here in China that the joy of watching you bloom is way more than worth the cost of the compromise that I'll experience for the 3 years that we're going to be here. Let's go. And that's life isn't anywhere near synchronous or symmetric. It just wants to be generative and joyful.
Yeah, it's
sacrificing be a part of joy. So we do these prototypes, we have these conversations, and you're going to go off and we're going to do this horsey thing where we're going to spend a year trying stuff out with all this open-mindedness, with permission to be surprised by joy, with tolerance for people not getting it, and then at the end kind of go, so what have we learned and what do we want to do? And we are going to lean into the we's experience, because when you do these prototypes, you're not doing research, you're not vetting, you're having an embodied encounter with reality you're growing into, and you might very well find that thing you didn't know you were looking for. You got to give that experience a chance to occur. We help people optimize the chance to find either what they're looking for or even that fun surprise by joy thing, finding the thing I didn't even know I was looking for.
And getting unstuck.
So that's the key. That's a little long, but and couples who have done that well have reported back all kinds of enthusiasm, and we have heard from people who have been in the Odyssey planning war fight, and it's no fun. You don't want to go there.
Right. It seems like it's a constant state of that term you use, reframing.
Yes.
Yeah, because one of the things we emphasize with the bucket is that we are not about living a longer life necessarily. Rather, we're about making the most of the years you have left. And it seems like life design is similar. It's not about necessarily getting to one thing. It's not point A to point B. It's a constant state of reframing, which leads to happiness.
Yeah, I mean, we thought long and hard about the tag, in particular our editor thought long and hard about the tagline of the cover of the current book, Designing Your Life, How to Build a Well-Lived, Joyful Life. Now, my buddy Phil Pizzo, who runs the DCI, the Distinguished Career Institute at Stanford, is a person interested in longevity, but that's not just the extension of protoplasm. That's about thriving and aliveness. I had a conversation with a 65-year-old, about to turn 66, who's early in kind of a traditional retirement and getting back into motorcycling like he did when he was a kid. Not in a crazy way, but in a pretty thoughtful way, proper training, proper gear, the whole bit, riding on safe streets, but loving the heck out of it, and he says, yes, it is a calculated risk. And a lot of my friends who are really nervous go, aren't you worried about dying? Aren't you worried about dying? He goes, I am. I'm trying to be very careful. I am worried about dying, but I'm much more worried about not being alive than I am about dying. So I think, and I think there's something to that we're trying to help people experience their aliveness. Joseph Campbell, the philosopher, talking about religion, said, is it about God? Is it about love? Is it about beauty? Is it about truth? He says, I think at the end of the day, it's really about that alive thing. I think what people want is the experience of being fully alive. And I would say amen to that. I think we're trying to help people realize their aliveness while they can.
That's great. I imagine doing this, it must be so satisfying when you see that aha moment when people do get unstuck.
Oh, my.
Like, do you actually see it?
We're so grateful. by a set of circumstances over which I have no control and no pride of authorship, because I didn't make this happen, that the world decided to pay attention to what we were saying at a particular point in time. But it does put us in a place where I hear over and over and over and over again of lives moving toward, a more joyful place, a more empowered, a more agent-bearing place. And it is incredibly heartwarming. I got an email a little while ago from a woman, and a lot of these we get anonymously, and rightly so. This woman writes, she says, I just want to thank you for your book. I am married to this lovely man who I have had the joy of being with for 38 years. But unfortunately, along the way, as a young man, he listened as his parents over and over and over and over again reminded him that he's just no damn good. And it has been a terrible struggle for him. But I got him your book, and I'm happy to tell you that for the first time in 38 years, he's unstuck and he's in motion.
Oh, that must be so sad.
I have no idea what he's stuck on. I have no idea what the motion looks like. All I know is somebody got going.
That must.
So yeah, we hear that a lot.
Yeah.
It's really humbling. We talk to people sometimes at difficult times, and like, where do we get off? I mean, who are you guys? I mean, where do you get off telling people how to live, or how to solve their big problems? I mean, we really respect what people bring to us, whether it's and we're not you. We don't know your situation. I'm not saying any of this stuff is easy or trivial. All we're saying is, look, life is challenging. And if there are just a couple of tools that make it a little more doable and a little more accessible with a little more joy along the way, that's all we're trying to say. We're not pretending to be anything we're not. But if we can be of a little help, that's a gift we're happy to give.
Well, that's great. And in fact, I've already ordered received copies of your book and workbook to give to friends and family, because I think it can help anybody at any time.
Well, thank you. That's very kind.
So how can our listeners either get the book or take the online class? Talk about that.
Sure. First of all, so the book is called Designing Your Life by, Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. It's available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble and any place you can find it. So that's the hard copy book. There's an audio book. Bill and Dave take turns reading chapters. You can listen to it. That's also available through all the usual channels on Kindle. It's a Kindle book. And then people say, gee, can I take the class? Well, we occasionally lead live workshops, typically 1 to 1.5 day workshops. There's some that for women only, run by the DOL Consulting Group, who are our partners in this. We have a small team of people doing this work. All that you can find at our website. And the website is very easy to find. It's just the title of the book with a dot in it. So DesigningYour.life, www.designingyour.life is the home website. And that announces activities. There's a newsletter you can sign up for. There's a bunch of free worksheets from the book you can download in PDF format. There are articles and as told to stories, and they're, I think, almost 60,000 people are getting the e-newsletter and chiming in. There are 300 life design communities collaborating together on their personal life design projects online around the world. So you can dive as deep into this stuff as you want. And then if you want to take the course, but you can't come to one of the live workshops, you can go to creativelive.com, creativelive, no punctuation, .com. When you get there, just put in the search bar Designing Your Life, and boom, you'll find the Designing Your Life online 22-module video training workshop, which is Bill and Dave actually teaching a live group of people who are actually mic'd up. So it's really, you're riding along in a live workshop. You're not just watching a talking head. And each of those 22 modules are the ones that we normally teach in our intensive 9-hour, 1-day workshop. And that product is available, I think the list price of the hardback book is like $27 on most online sites. It's probably, 15 or 20. And then the course, I think, lists for like $200, and More than half the time, it's on sale for $100. And once you buy it, it's a lifetime license. So those are and then there's the workbook. You mentioned the workbooks that Knopf published. Let's say you want to go through the book and really do all the exercises. There's a workbook, spiral bound with lots of blank pages and prompts and reminders and stories and stuff that you can have all in one place. You don't need it. You can get your own typewriter or your own keyboard or your own piece of paper, your own journal as your documentation process with the regular book. So you can buy the book and the workbook. You can buy the whole thing if you want. We did that not because we're trying to be in the product business. We did it because we just got tons of questions from lots of people saying, "Can I have or could you help us?" And so all we've built is the stuff that people have sort of pounded out of us.
Yeah, I mean it's really valuable, and when I look at it, it's telling me things I didn't already know and have read and seen before about getting unstuck. So I really want to thank you, and I thank Bill too, because he's part of this, and really appreciate your time.
Yeah, we just got off the phone. He's driving to Stanford to teach today, and he was thrilled we were doing this conversation, thrilled about the work you guys are doing, because this is our tribe. I'm 66, and Bill's decided to be 59 for the rest of his life 2 years ago. I'll put it that way. And I hang out with these. This is the tribe I'm currently committed to. The only Stanford course I teach are to bucket people. I have a whole team of 5 that are teaching the undergrads and the grads. But this is the group that it's a huge population of people that really deserve the help. So I'm glad you guys are doing what you're doing. And listeners, you can do this.
Oh, I know they can. Thank you so much, Dave. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening. I hope hearing what Dave and Bill have created can help you get out of your ruts, whether it's changing careers, finding happiness in retirement, or even re-energizing a relationship. Life design is really worth checking out. To learn more, go to designingyour.life, and to learn more about The Bucket, go to thebucket.com. That's The Bucket, all one word, .com. And if you know someone you think should be in a future Bucket podcast, let us know at bucketfeedback@thebucket.com. Thanks for listening.